Hello, lovely friend. I am Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
And this is the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast.
Good morning, gorgeous people. How are you this morning? I am joined by my beautiful colleague, Dr. Mary. Gorgeous one, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm not like 100%, but I'm good. I had this hideous health horribleness recently where I got struck down with a terrible virus that launched me into this migraine career of just getting these terrible, terrible migraines. And I am heaps better. I'm so much better, but I am still just getting little mild migraines every day. But they are slowly getting better and better with my rehab exercises and with lots of self-care and good food and healthy, lovely ketones for my brain. But you know what? I'm actually not fabulously amazing, feeling a bit off today. How are you?
Well, I certainly don't have hideous, horrible health that has just moved into mildly manageable migraines. In fact, I'm actually great. I am great because for me, it's summertime in Melbourne. And whilst Melbourne is not renowned for the world's best summers, it is actually lovely and sunny outside my window. And I love that. I love sunshine. I love that feeling of a bit of sun on my skin. I love being able to swim in the sun. So for me, I'm feeling pretty good. One of the things I think that is adding to my little dopamine repertoire is we have a new puppy. So he's the cutest little thing, and he reminds me a lot of your puppy Shadow, your dog, now grown-up dog.
Yes.
He's a border collie. It's actually not my personal dog. He's my daughter's dog. My daughter is now 20, and it's her dog. His name is Kai, which means ocean in Hawaiian. I don't know if anyone realised that, but it's a very popular boy's name in Australia and I think America at the moment anyway.
My nephew's called Kai. He's fabulous.
Yeah. So I think it's a good name. It suits her. She's an ocean girl. She loves the beach. She loves the swimming. She's studying marine science. So it all fits in with her identity, which, as we know, your identity and who you identify as is an important marker of health. And we can certainly change our identities if we need to. He's a blue merle, so he's got one blue eye, one brown eye. But I tell you what, I forgot how much puppies like to dig. So, my rose garden, which is currently full of holes, is reasonably spectacular. But the one thing he did do the other night was, it was nighttime and we heard all this barking, and my daughter went out and she starts screaming, oh my God, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what's out there? And so my husband runs out, and it turns out that the dog had dug this huge hole all the way down and pulled out a yabby. So for our, overseas listeners, a yabby is sort of like a lobster / crayfish.
Little lobster, freshwater lobster.
Yeah, in a dirt hole. Must have been so he's obviously dug, down to the water table or something. And there's this blue nipped. Anyway, luckily we have a dam on our property, so Ty, my husband, Ty and Kai, Ty scoops up the yabby and puts it down into the dam. But yes, that was a funny little story.
Yeah. That is funny. Border collies, bless them. I have to just quickly interject with a little border collie anecdote of my own. My now grown-up border collie, it's got one brown eye and one green. She's smart, as border collies are, and has figured out how to open doors. She can open doors. We've got like the doors that have the flat doorknob, and she can jump on them, pull them down and push. And no room in the house is safe unless it closes the other way. So she can lock herself in rooms. If she can only push them open, she can't pull. But yes, they're so smart.
They are.
It's annoying.
They are smart. They are very smart.
So from troublesome border collies onto something quite serious now. February 4th is World Cancer Day, which has just been the time of this recording. And we would like to chat about how cancer fits in to the greater metabolic health picture. Lucy and I, we are metabolic health experts. We empower people to heal their metabolism and reclaim their health. And this is so much, this goes far beyond simple weight loss. Weight management is part of it, but it's just a small part of it. Having poor metabolic health causes and increases your risk of lots of cancers. And Lucy, perhaps you could list, tell us what the cancers are that we know are associated with metabolic ill health and insulin resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Maz. So there's actually 13 known cancers that are known to be associated with increased weight. So in particular with obesity, which is, and again, obesity, such a fraught term, mainly because it's been used, as a slur, and people feel very judged by it. So in this case, we're just using it purely as a medical terminology, medical word. We know that the majority of obesity is associated with high insulin. So these cancers that, you have increased risk of developing these cancers if you have significant obesity. So these are esophageal cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer, gallbladder cancer, kidney cancer or renal cancer, bowel cancer, multiple myeloma, meningioma, which is actually often a benign tumour, thyroid cancer, stomach cancer, pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, and uterine cancer. It's big. It's big mess.
And as you read that list, in my mind, people, like patients, flashed into my mind. I've known people with every one of those, and beautiful people that have been in my life as patients and clients. And it's a lot more than a list. It really is people's lives that are adversely affected by insulin resistance.
Yeah.
There are lots of the mechanisms by which insulin resistance causes cancer. They're quite, that there's a lot of them, and it's even not entirely understood. Insulin resistance itself is a very, very complex metabolic disorder that plays out at the level of our mitochondria in our cells, and it's a dysregulation of how we manage our fuel. Insulin resistance causes inflammation, it causes increased oxidation, increased reactive oxygen species in our bodies. It affects the way that our cells function. It actually causes changes in our genetics and the way that our genes are expressed, epigenetics. It increases certain stress responses, which change the way that proteins in our cells react. And it can also increase, from a hormonal point of view, elevated insulin and insulin resistance creates this hormonal setting within the body that literally increases the growth of cancer cells. And we know that many cancer cells have got increased insulin receptors, so they become more prone to grow in response to elevated insulin. All of these things happen quite at a complex biochemical level that can prime the body to get more cancers, to be more prone to cancer. And it's horrible. And I have known people with every single one of those conditions. I have known people. And it certainly gets me very fired up, because it is at its heart something that we can prevent, and it's something that we can treat and reverse with the right advice. But our food environment has just been created so that insulin resistance is so common in our society. We are just processed food, high carb, high inflammatory foods have been normalized. And if you're in the situation where you've got insulin resistance and high insulin, if you've got obesity, to use that fraught term, I would argue very strongly that it is not your fault.
No.
It is definitely, however, your responsibility, and you can do something about it when you know how.
Absolutely. And I think, Maz, hopefully people know that we are not in the business of judging people. And I know that lots of people do feel judged for, things that and it's called choices, choices, but often it doesn't feel like a choice. It doesn't feel like a choice to have processed food, and for lots of people, it's actually not a choice. Their environment, their circumstances. Processed foods is particularly cheap. It's convenient. It's easy. And for a lot of people, it doesn't feel like a choice. I would even say that, smoking, which we know is positively associated not just with lung cancer, but dozens of other cancers, for a lot of people, it's not their choice. They don't want to smoke, but they've arrived at a circumstance where maybe they were young, they were vulnerable, there was peer pressure, they started smoking. It was, encouraged. You were ostracized if you didn't do it. There was all these, things that are now regulated that we don't do. And, 30, 40 years later, they found that stopping is almost impossible. Now, that's not to say it isn't, but it doesn't feel like they're choosing to smoke. And so I think the same could be said for our food environment. And you're right, it is the choices, and I'm using air quotes for those people that can't see through the podcast. It's not always a choice. It's sometimes a tool or a mechanism that you will use to manage a situation. So that situation might be your thoughts, it might be your feelings, it might be a time, it might be money. So in particular, the insulin resistance and the obesity that often comes with that is a symptom of the root cause. And until we can get down to that root cause, just telling people to lose weight is unhelpful.
No, absolutely. And it puts the blame back on them. And, both professionally and personally, having known people that have had cancer, that the stigma and the fear and the shame that could potentially go along with then pointing the finger and saying, well, it's your fault, is not only untrue, but could potentially be extremely harmful.
Yeah.
It's not your fault.
No, it's not. It's most definitely not your fault. We do like to say, though, that it is your responsibility, which again is not to judge people, but if you're waiting for government to regulate things, like I would love some regulation around the advertising of processed food to children. But in fact, even regulating that now, those companies are bypassing all of those through social media platforms and whatnot. So waiting for somebody else to come and fix the problem, it's never going to happen. So, it's your job to fix the problem. It's your job to find a solution. And in many ways, it's our job to help you with that.
That is what we'd love to do, because the solution, it really, really can work. If you've got the right advice, if you know how to nourish your body so that you can lower your insulin, reverse the effects of insulin resistance, if you know how to manage your mind so that you can make those changes easy and make those changes last, then you really can heal your body and still eat food within your budget and still really enjoy your life and still have all of the things that perhaps you might fear wouldn't be there if you stopped eating so much fast food and processed foods and high carb foods. Your life can be wonderful and much healthier when you know how. It really is. I reckon, actually, Lucy, it would be wonderful if we could do a bit of an insulin 101 here.
Sure.
And you, being the analogy queen that you are, lovely one, could you please give us an analogy about what actually is insulin and what actually is insulin resistance.
Okie dokie. So one of the things is, again, back to basics, insulin is a hormone. So it's a hormone made by our pancreas. It's got a couple of jobs. One of its jobs is to move glucose from our blood into, say, our muscles and into the cells for fuel. So when we eat food is particularly carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. So carbohydrates are sugars and starches of any sort. They're broken down into glucose. The pancreas goes, oh, glucose coming, radio, make some insulin. So it makes some insulin, which is great. Insulin's not bad. If you don't have any insulin, you die. It's a disaster. So we want insulin. And then it moves that glucose from your blood into your cells, which is great. But what's happened over the last 40, 50 years, basically because of our food environment coupled with a bit of genetics, is that we're now finding that our pancreas is having to work very hard. So our cells are stuffed full of glucose and the pancreas goes, oh, right, God, I better make some more hormone. So it makes more insulin, buckets of insulin. So then you've got lots of insulin. And so what this actually means, and this was the bit that I either missed, maybe I was having a nap in medical school, or I think probably it wasn't actually explained, is that insulin stops fat breakdown. So what that means in real terms is if you imagine that your body is like a house and you've got all these wood fires, all these fireplaces heating it up. So when we make a fire in the fireplace, you usually use some kindling, which is a quick form of energy, essentially. Small bits of wood, paper, that stuff. That's like our glucose. And this is what we use it for. People often say, I'm so tired, I need a bit of energy, and they'll have, a sugary drink or whatnot. So you've got glucose, and then we've also got logs. So the logs are like our fat, and they burn long and slow. And in an ideal, metabolically flexible person, you use some kindling, and then when your kindling's burnt, your body will pop a log on the fireplace. So efficient, so sensible, such a perfect way for our body to fuel itself. But what happens with insulin resistance or high circulating insulin, instead of having those logs readily available next to your fireplaces, they're in a woodshed, which is where you would store your logs. So the woodshed, so your body goes, rightio, okay, I've had some food, ready for the next form of fuel, and it toddles out to the woodshed, and there's all of these logs. Like most of us have plenty of stored fuel, heaps of it, all lined up there, and you try to get a log out and the door is locked. And it's locked tight, and that lock might be, you might have one, you might have two, you might have 10 padlocks on your woodshed. And those padlocks are your level of insulin resistance or your level of circulating insulin. So if you've got lots of insulin, really high insulin levels, you'll have 10 locks. So you can't open it. Doesn't matter what you do. You just can't. So you come back to your dwindling fireplace, which by now is just filled with a few embers, and you're starting to get a bit hungry, you're tired, you're hangry, you can't think, and you get that, people talk about it. They get a hypo or they feel hypo or they feel lethargic or they just can't think properly. And so they eat and they get hungry. Again, the brain's going, my God, get some fuel into you, woman. So if we wait super long, the brain, again, it's clever, goes, right, what's the fastest thing I can do? And it's looking then for a quick fix. So that'll be, soft drink, cakes, lollies, chocolate, muesli bars, because they're quick kindling. And then what does that do? Puts up the insulin, adds another lock, and the cycle then, you just get stuck in this cycle. So, this is when we always say to people, we want people to be able to open their woodshed, burn your stored fuel, burn your fat. And at the moment, if you have high insulin, unless you change what you're doing, you can't. So, Maz, maybe you can help us out with telling us, well, what can you do? How do you open your woodshed?
Yes. So you want to get into that stored fat and you want to be able to burn logs for fuel on your metabolic fire. You need to get insulin down. And how you do that is by reducing the amount of sugars that you eat, the amount of starches that you eat, because our bodies will break starch, like starchy foods, your bread, your rice, your potatoes, your pasta, will break that starch immediately down to glucose, even before we swallow it. Enzymes in our saliva will break it down to glucose. So if you find a way to reduce your sugars, starches, and processed foods, and instead eat yummy, delicious, filling real food, and find a way to make that work for you, then your insulin levels will come down. And as your insulin levels come down, so will your insulin resistance. And when that happens, your body is able to start burning that fat for fuel. And in this woodshed analogy, it's a great one. We are talking purely about weight loss here. So the woodshed is like your stored body fat. And if you can get your insulin down, then you can burn your stored body fat and you can lose weight, which is, of course, an important goal for a lot of people. But it goes way beyond that. If you are mostly kindling that carbohydrates for fuel in your metabolic fires, actually, your whole house is pretty much on fire. There's a lot going wrong for you. Another analogy you could use is that we've got two types of fuel for a car. Can you imagine? You've got this awesome sports car. I know nothing about cars, so this is going to be a pretty sparse analogy. But you've got, your premium fuel that is going to make the car work well. And then maybe you've got some really cheap and dirty sort of fuel that's laced with, biofuel and canola oil and whatever else. And you could put that in the car and the car will run, but it's smoky and unhappy and the engine components start to break down and rust and corrode, but it's the only fuel you've got, so you keep using it. That's what happens when we've got insulin resistance and our bodies can only effectively utilize glucose for fuel. It causes a lot of problems at that biochemical, molecular, cellular level that primes the body for illnesses like type 2 diabetes, like increased inflammation, like cancer, like arthritis, like dementia. So many things go wrong when you've got high insulin resistance and you're not able to burn your fat for fuel.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I want to point out, and I know, weight loss is a fraught term, a bit like obesity. It's like, it's not politically correct. However, we know that adipose, which is the fancy name for fat cells, adipose tissue that is particularly in our mid-region, so around our abdominal cavity, in our abdominal cavity is particularly inflammatory. It makes these fancy things called adipokines, which are inflammation cells that run around creating havoc. So when, Dr. Mary, when you say, your house is on fire, it is. It is. It's like, and again, I've never been in a bushfire, half Australia has, and you're constantly putting embers out on your roof. That's what insulin resistance is doing to our body. It is constantly trying to heal itself, to put all these fires out, and yet embers are raining down on it.
At so many different levels. Like it affects our health on multiple hormonal, biochemical, metabolic, cellular processes. It just sets us up for this terrible imbalance. But you can rebalance it, and you can rebalance it by making what are actually doable and sustainable changes, although I will admit that it can seem completely overwhelming. And the amount of times that when I first talk to people who've come to see me as a doctor and they want to lose weight, or it turns out we've done some tests and they've got insulin resistance or problems associated with insulin resistance, or their arthritis, whatever their health problem is would be improved by reducing their insulin resistance. And I talk to them about reducing sugars and starches, the glaze over, like, no, that's impossible. I couldn't possibly do that. But you can. And this is what we love to do, Lucy. This is what we love to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think the story is around weight loss is that weight loss is hard, that it's a battle, it's a struggle. Like, they're all the words that are used around it. And part of it is changing that story in your head, knowing that it doesn't have to be a battle. Part of the reason it's been a battle is that lots of people have been given the wrong advice around particularly just calorie restriction, long-term calorie restriction, which just really revolves around willpower, without getting back to that root cause of, yes, what you eat is super important, but knowing why you eat is actually the key. When you know why you eat, what tools, food in particular, is serving for you, and then learning new skills so that you're not reliant on particularly processed food or those, simple sugars and starches, then you can actually do the work and heal. And it can not only be easy, this sounds a tiny bit weird, but it can actually be fun.
Yes, it can be. When you've got less cravings and less mental chatter in your head, when you've got strengthened mindset, when you're still eating yummy, delicious food, yeah, it can totally be fun. You can absolutely reclaim your life. You can. It's not fun. It's being stuck in this hideous cycle of yo-yo dieting, and this hideous cycle of being hungry, this hideous cycle of being unwell and trying everything under the sun but nothing working. That's not fun. But being able to take back your power, to get your hunger under control, to get your cravings under control. Totally.
I know. And
we do have a lot of fun.
It is fun because it's like, we often say this, weight loss is not a meal plan. It's it's a journey of personal discovery. It is. It's personal development. And at its heart, I love personal development. It's really fun. And it's, it's learning and it's expansion, and it's so much more than just a bloody diet.
That's right. It's not a bloody diet. Definitely not.
Awesome one. Well, I think we should probably conclude this chat, and most definitely we will be talking further about all things insulin resistance. We will be touching on cancer in future episodes. So, lovely listeners, we look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Bye-bye.
The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualised medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.